see if it's working.
Different.
What's going on? Good to see you. I want to thank you.
Yeah, that's what I was.
I've been with
Mexican place? Right.
Yeah.
I need to turn the sound off.
They got caught today.
It'll backfeed and you'll get a loop if you don't.
Like, can you tell they've been there? They're just heading all the way back. Jim tried Greece. But, you know, that's why it's just like inflation. That's what based on minimum knowledge, so. Well, you know.
Just make sure I say.
Okay, I was curious. I was already done. I don't know what else. Love to get to it.
Oh, no, Brendan, no, Brendan. I swear to God. She said he flipped and said he didn't understand.
Didn't understand.
I was like, oh, man.
What's mean playing going into? I don't know if I was
Like Uncle Eddie at Christmas vacation.
That was a design.
That's not good.
Glad you were sitting there.
I don't think we could kind of.
There's a thing on here.
We don't see those. Oh yeah, but we're good.
No, that's it. Derek is on his good side now. No, they're not moving back in last time I talked to them. Thank you.
There's a little bubble, this main, right here.
Oh yeah.
And there's a little level bubble. And this leg, it was telling us that that leg was.
Hopefully clear that building.
Derek had a rough morning this morning. Yeah, he did.
Were you there?
Well, his temporary restraining order got overturned. He got run back and lost this time. You know, when you get a chance. Instead of
Was it we did 12.
Don't tell the other person to show up. Challenge the non-stop spewing. Yeah, I said that. June Gillums had a letter from Great Rivers Crossing. A few days, a week maybe. Because they kept coming back because of course he moves his office around. Mail can catch up to him.
So it looks like you're all good to go.
About him putting his fence on their property. Right, and the right of way. And that was hearing Lou gave his letter. Lou gave his lawyer.
We had talked to Jeff, and he said, hey, you got a meeting with Drew.
Oh, right now?
So, he gave her this letter, she opened up, read it, funny face, he said, she handed it to Derek. So, he's got to move the fence and a bunch of gravel. And he's got another 20 days to do it.
You were at the, meeting the other day that I
Yeah,
was
okay.
there.
Thank
Yeah, we try to be pretty responsive.
Well, I heard, I was just.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
you. You need to see her. So I don't know if you can just move it out a bit. Yeah.
It's not zoomed in.
Is there also?
Yeah.
It is zoomed down.
Well, and it zoomed.
No, there's no zoom. Yeah. Ah. That's better.
Oh yeah, you didn't. Yeah, the time delays.
Well, no, the restraining order is basically an injunction to keep us from posting no occupancy return.
That's that remote thing though. You can zoom with that too if you want to adjust it without touching the camera, so you don't have to worry about shaping it right. Just or if somebody's talking. All right, well, I'm gonna get out of here. Okay. Thank you so much. I'm glad you got it. I do need to get that from you tomorrow though, because we're going out to the Lake of the Ozarks on Friday.
Do you want me to bring it tonight after the meeting?
I'm probably sleeping by then. But this can we hook up tomorrow night or tomorrow night or Thursday?
Okay. Oh, I can do that tomorrow. Hello, how are you? Too short. I'm flying soon. 2 weeks. After 5 years, it was
I've been having Kathy go to
I didn't see her today, they asked her.
Yeah, she
I
had
remember
given me
when
a
I
color. I said,
landed
"An
in
app,
France,
and
2 weeks ago in Bali.
send them to them." She's like,
I said I went for
I'll give you the chance. He said, "Well,
I don't know if I can because
you contact them, give them the information." But they immediately responded, they're very happy. They said they take care of it. They'll be very
I want to talk to you.
my children there so we can see around the world and stuff like that.
Yeah, that would be all right, but there's no sense.
What about you? You good?
Yeah.
Yeah? Gary's good too?
He's hanging out.
But actually, show me that you was
Unless maybe one came in like yesterday or today, but I don't know.
I think if I'm not mistaken, I offered you guys to. I mean, if you want to send me a resume, I can see around me.
He'll talk with you, I'll tell him that when I get back.
Use your network.
When he's trying to do what he's talking about, he's put an application, and I try to do the teams that actually everything. So many of them are but he's scary.
Well, unfortunately, we need down to have security. The University of Southwest Missouri is offering some additional classes that don't cost very much, which could help you. I mean, you need, if you can, would be beneficial for me.
I think that is an angle that he has to consider. I didn't think that he would excel enough to meet with.
You need to excel and to understand how it works.
It's minor stuff with his, but if they're asking for something.
No, we're gonna
I think they were trying to do.
didn't have anybody who could make it, so I was like,
I can talk to people around. Doesn't do it, doesn't do it.
Okay, like we know what we're doing.
You can't start out that far behind, you know, trying to make emergency contacts, you know, like, okay. Let it settle.
I guess I'm strange, so. How did today go for you?
Yeah, that's like I said,
Okay, we call this meeting of the Board of Aldermen to order. If you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. City Clerk, please take roll call.
Alderman Green. Here. Alderman Wallace.
Here.
Alderman Stack. Here. Alderman Charbonneau.
Here.
Alderman Maybe.
Here.
Alderman Miguel.
Here.
Alderman Anderson.
Here.
Alderman Kennedy. They are present to have your flag, Your Honor.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is presentations, communications, and appointments. The first item is an oath of office for firefighter paramedic Joseph Smart. Chief?
Thank you, Your Honor.
I, Joseph M. Smart, do hereby declare that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
That I will support the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of Missouri,
the Constitution of the State of Missouri,
and the Charter of the City of Crestwood.
and the Charter of the City of Crestwood.
I swear I will protect, safeguard, and preserve life, health, and property against fire and other perils.
I will swear to protect, safeguard, and preserve life, health, and property against fire and other perils.
I will uphold the standards of my profession, continually striving to achieve the objectives and ideals the fire service instills.
I will uphold the standards of my profession, continually striving to achieve the objectives and ideals the fire service instills.
I will never allow my personal feelings or danger to self deter me from my responsibilities as a first responder and guardian of the community.
I will never allow my personal feelings nor danger to self deter me from my responsibilities as a first responder and a guardian of the community.
I will at all times respect the property and rights of all.
I will at all times respect the property and rights of all.
I recognize the badge of my office as a symbol of public faith and trust, and I will remain true to the ethics of the fire service.
I recognize the badge of my office as a symbol of public faith and trust, and I will remain true to the ethics of the fire service.
As a member of the Crestwood Fire Department, I accept the self-imposed and self-enforced obligation as my responsibility and make these promises so solemnly, freely, and upon my own.
As a member of the Crestwood Fire Department, I accept this self-imposed and self-enforced obligation as my responsibility and make these promises so solemnly and freely upon my own.
Okay, we'll move on. The next item on the agenda is a proclamation, number 1703. Is Santa Ted here?
He'll be here in just a second.
Okay.
He's parking the sleigh.
Okay. Reindeer moving a little slow today, is that the problem?
Yeah, just a tad.
I'm sorry? He is, okay. Stay in a second. Okay, so as I said, the next item on the agenda is a proclamation, number 1703. And is Santa Claus here? Oh. Hey, Santa, would you come up to the podium, please? We didn't call you up here because it's your birthday. We called you. I know. But we have another one, I'm sure, coming up, won't you? Oh, next year. Good. No, we wanted to recognize you for all the years that you've served the city of Crestwood, both at the mall and for the work that you've done through the Christmas and Crestwood organization here in our city. Your constant attendance at all of our activities has been greatly appreciated, and we certainly want to honor you for all of those years of service that you provided to us. So if you don't mind, I'm going to have the city clerk read the proclamation which will be presented to you.
Proclamation number 1703. Whereas Ted Ricks has been Santa Ted for 18 years, and whereas he began his Santa career after retiring from IBM after 30 years of computer repair, and whereas Santa Ted was at the Crestwood Plaza for 13 years, arriving by helicopter to the delight of many children and Santa Ted himself. And whereas, after the mall closed, Santa Ted found a new way to bring joy to children, youth, adults, and seniors by teaming up with Christmas in Crestwood. And whereas now Santa Ted arrives at City Hall by way of the Crestwood fire truck, and after every child tells Santa Ted their wish, and before returning to the North Pole, he leaves by convertible to party away the night at the annual Christmas in Crestwood fireworks show. And whereas Ted is a leader, a role model, and a legacy in the city of Crestwood, and now, therefore, I, Greg Roby, Mayor of the City of Crestwood, and the Board of Aldermen, do hereby proclaim December 2nd, 2017 as Santa Ted Day in the City of Crestwood, and extend our heartfelt thanks for making every day Christmas in Crestwood. Proclaimed this 12th day of September.
Not everybody. Okay, I'll ask for a motion and a second for approval of proclamation.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. Thanks again, Santa Ted. Okay. That was probably the highlight of my career as a mayor. Next item on the agenda is acknowledgement of receipt of the CID annual reports from the districts. City Clerk?
We just simply need to acknowledge if anyone has some questions, you can entertain those, and we need to enter it into the record that they were received by the board upon this date.
Okay.
No action.
Okay. So do we need a motion? We don't. Okay, just to acknowledge that we have received those from the districts. I know we have meetings later this week with the owners for approval on that. Okay. Okay, next item on the agenda. Alderman McGill, did you have a question regarding these?
I just have a comment. As I reviewed the reports, I noticed that there are no insurance fees or charges on the, or audit charges on Crestwood Square for the year 2016. And while they've been budgeted in the past, there just haven't been any expenditures shown for those two items. So I would just point that out to the chair, especially if they're going to have meetings in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Anyone else? Okay, I see no other lights. So we move on then to the aldermanic goals progress update.
Thank you, Mayor. For those not aware, perhaps in the audience, earlier in the year, in February, the Board of Aldermen met at a retreat to establish a set of short-term and long-term goals and priorities for the city. I'm here tonight to provide an update on our progress towards those goals. You can follow along on the slides. They're printed off and contained in the packets tonight. Otherwise, I'll be working through them on the projector screen up here, assuming this cooperates. There we go. So there were 5 short-term priorities that were established that were immediate focus areas for the city staff, for the city more broadly. Citizen education and engagement regarding the April 2017 property tax ballot issue, education engagement regarding the comprehensive plan implementation, holding a joint meeting between the Planning and Zoning Commission and Board of Aldermen to prioritize implementation of the comprehensive plan, evaluating neighborhood infrastructure and coming up with a plan to address needs, and an emphasis on additional community festivals and events. So the first priority was the property tax ballot issue. Obviously, if you've been paying attention, you're aware that it passed. We held numerous town hall meetings, had a significant social media and online communications campaign, put forth a significant amount of effort to educate voters and get people engaged in the ballot issue. The result, approval by voters, and the turnout for that election was especially notable when you compare it to the region's turnout, which I think reflects some of the efforts that we undertook on this issue. Priority 2, comprehensive plan implementation. I would rate this one as in progress. It's probably going to be in progress for many, many, many years to come. But some of the things that we did do this year, we did hold the joint P&Z Board of Aldermen prioritization meeting. We applied for a Great Streets grant, and we were nearly awarded that significant grant. We've applied for technical assistance grants with other communities. We're working to develop wayfinding for Grants Trail, which is one of the goals of the comprehensive plan. Staff has proposed and will continue to prepare code changes in light of the adoption of the comprehensive plan, such as the parking maximums and such as forthcoming rezonings. We do recommend restarting the city newsletter next year, which would enhance communications and really enable us to engage the community in some of what's going on with the comprehensive plan. Because I think a lot of the things that plan recommends are going to require a significant amount of communication with the public. As I mentioned, we held a joint P&Z Board of Aldermen meeting, identified some of the priorities, focusing on development opportunities to generate revenue, focusing on the need for a zoning code update, and focusing on connectivity between residential areas, parks, and other public spaces. Evaluating neighborhood infrastructure, this is another one that's just going to be a continual item for us, but we did hold the joint Board of Aldermen Public Works Board meeting earlier this year. Sidewalk maintenance was one of the big issues that was out there for that neighborhood infrastructure, because before you build new sidewalks, I think you need to take care of the sidewalks that you have. We came up with a plan for addressing them, and we plan to implement that in 2018. As I mentioned before, related to this is we applied for the Great Streets Grant. A number of our actions might hit multiple priorities or goals, so I'm just going to call those out when they're applicable. I think one of the next steps for us as we take on the sidewalk program next year to improve the quality of our existing sidewalks is to focus then on a more robust plan for neighborhood infrastructure, especially connectivity, potentially focusing on street lighting and stormwater, which has previously been a focus for the city. More community events. In progress, we held an Aldermanic barbecue event. We have been conversing with Sunset Hills, and we're planning a joint carnival and parade in partnership with that city. Probably something along Edian Park, though we're still working to identify a potential site. And as we get closer to the end of the year, we're going to work on forming a steering committee to oversee what we envision would be a significant event for both communities. Obviously, we continue to support Christmas in Crestwood. As a reminder, this year they were awarded regional recognition for civic engagement efforts. And obviously we are, as we've had some turnover in Parks and Rec, we are now examining the optimal recreation staffing that might enable us to increase capacity for events. Looking at shuffling some things around and figuring out what works best for all parties. Some long-range focus areas that were called out in that document, we talked about citizen involvement, and one of the items was adding the leading emerging committees for efficiency. I marked that complete. That's nearly complete. I think we have one item tonight that's related to that, and that would be the last of the significant to-do items as it pertains to city committees. Educating voters on city finances and efficiencies. We have run multiple e-newsletter articles on the topic. We discuss it in the annual budget. We did take on educating our residents about the city financial situation in some of our Prop C voter education efforts. Again, I recommend restarting the city newsletter. This is another topic that we could address in detail in a venue like that. We are undertaking a review of the White Cliff Master Plan, which is a task for the new manager of recreation. That's an item that's in progress. Development and planning. I think comprehensive plan and review and implementation probably doesn't make sense as a monthly planning and zoning agenda item, but it probably needs to be at least quarterly or semi-annual in order to actually have some meaningful progress updates each time it comes up. So we're evaluating how best to accomplish that. Updating city codes regarding neighborhoods. We updated the fire code a short time ago. Well, actually, that's going to be approved, the first reading of the fire code, I should say. That's on file and will be considered and approved by the Board of Aldermen at a future meeting, but that's in progress and nearly complete. We're evaluating other development codes and we're updating them as time permits. And we recommend the zoning code update as discussed at the Planning and Zoning joint meeting earlier this year for 2018. And we obviously continually seek out development opportunities whenever they come up. We've had several productive meetings with prospects, and we're hopeful that soon we'll have some meaningful progress on a variety of areas in the city. One of the only item that was filed under city financial sustainability was resolving the Afton fire situation. We've filed a lawsuit this year. Strategic partnerships, partnering with Sunset Hills regarding Watson Road. We jointly applied with them for the Great Streets Grant, and at this point we plan to reapply next year. Partner with other organizations for community buildings. We do partner with the business community for a variety of events. One of the things that our new manager of recreation accomplished in her prior experience that we would look to take advantage of here is partnerships with the business community to promote city recreation events. And I think those sorts of partnerships yield a lot of value, both for the businesses, but also for the city, hopefully increasing traffic to our events. We won the Muni Award, as I previously mentioned, for Christmas in Crestwood, a partnership in the community, and we're going to continue exploring whatever opportunities make sense. Community events, another item that was called out under strategic partnerships. We've expanded our recreation offerings. We have a new outdoor movie screen and projector. We held the Aldermanic barbecue. The first iteration was, I think, a good start and something we can build on going forward. And as I mentioned, we're working on the carnival and parade with Sunset Hills. That pretty much touched most of the major long-range focus areas. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them on at this time.
I see we're also working on a Watson Road historic project with the cities of Shrewsbury, Marlborough, Webster Groves, Sunset Hills, and Crestwood. And we're having ongoing meetings with various organizations regarding how to establish a historic Watson Road venue throughout all of our communities. So that's forthcoming as well. Alderman Wallach?
Yeah, just a suggestion. In regards to community events, do we know when the Public Works building is going to be completed?
The target is March of 2018.
Okay.
That's at least the target for substantial completion.
Okay. You know, some communities have Public Works Day, and again, I know in regards to 2018, I think the Public Works Week is recognized May 20 through 26 nationally. Now, I don't know whether it makes sense to maybe have some type of event, Public Works Day, where has a residents can go to visit the facilities, and maybe we have some type of carnival, some type of event outside on the ground to create that.
And what some other communities do is they'll have a lot of cool vehicles out in, in the staging area and let people kind of explore and interact with them. That's certainly something we could do.
Okay. The other thing too, again, in regards to, I know we're actively seeking out redevelopment and development of the city. I know we recently, a year ago, 2 years ago, we did these small business entrepreneurial startups. Is there anything that we can, as a board, suggest or promote to promote businesses? Because, we don't really see that. You may have meetings with some of the businesses as potential startups. So again, I guess we don't know that. Well, actually, not to say that. We just don't see the end result. Is there anything that we can do as a city to promote that in a different program to promote the businesses to come here to Crestwood? I don't know of any, so I'm just throwing it out there because, again, as you indicated in the forecast, again, our budget is going 5%, or I'm sorry, 0.5% or 0.501% increase, and I don't see that changing in the near future. Is there any type of programs that we can have that can kind of promote that? I recognize that maybe events will possibly bring in people, but is there anything else that we can actually to promote small businesses to come here to locate here in Crestwood as an incentive program? So rather than
it might probably be a good topic for the Economic Development Commission to discuss if they've got any ideas.
Right. Okay. Right. Thanks.
You have the floor. Alderman, maybe you have the floor.
Just a brief question. You had mentioned on the street with the grants. Obviously, we are all informed about great streets. The board passed a resolution. What were the technical grants with other cities that we were seeking?
Mr. Jones, do you mind talking a little bit about them? I know that was the one we had worked with Kirkwood on. I believe it was for smart growth or something along those lines.
Smart Growth America.
Yes.
We jointly applied with the cities of Ellisville, Kirkwood, and ourselves to apply for that grant, and that was to look at different ways that we can increase modality or multimodality within the cities for pedestrian connections as well as bicycles and other modes of transportation.
Did we receive that grant, or do we know yet?
No, we did not receive that grant either.
Okay. Okay, thank you. That's all I had.
Okay. See no other lights? So, appreciate that.
No action.
Okay, appreciate it. Next item on the agenda is public hearings. We have none. Next item on the agenda is Mayor, Board of Aldermen, and City Administrator reports and/or comments. Alderman Green? Alderman Wallach?
I do. Again, I did attend the beautification committee, but I'm going to have a counterpart on staff to talk about that committee. In regards to the parks, again, over the weekend, they're actually one of the community events that didn't get it by our city administrator was moving to park. We actually did have one in Ferndale Park. It was actually a pretty good show out this past Friday. Beautiful weather out. The movie was Sing, which is an animated movie, but actually it was pretty fun to watch. I stayed around for a little while, but since it was animated, it got kind of flat. But really, everybody seemed to have a good time. And I want to thank the park staff for promoting that and providing some of the popcorn and some of the other items for the people in attending that. Other things that are coming out in regards to the parks. Again, there's a Parks Board meeting coming up next Tuesday on the 19th. Other events of interest is the Vintage Baseball game at Whitecliff Park. That's on September 23rd. Also, there is the citywide yard sale that's coming up end of the month, which is September 30th. And just need to register by September 26th. Again, that's both communities, which is Sunset Hills and Crestwood. And I think that's it.
Thank you. Alderman Stetter?
Thank you, Your Honor. We did hold a beautification committee meeting a week ago tonight on September 5th. Alderman Wallach and I attended, and we had quite a lot going on in that meeting. The committee did receive bids for sprinkler systems for both City Hall grounds as well as Whitecliff. The City Hall bid came back at $10,000. The Whitecliff Park bid came back at $4,000 due to the size of the budget and the need. The decision was made to go forward with putting in a sprinkler system at Whitecliff to keep the grounds watered there, but to not move forward with expanding the City Hall watering system as it was just too cost prohibitive. Let's see. The board also made the decision to support Christmas in Crestwood for a joint effort that's going to be coming up, and I think there's two ladies in the back that are going to speak about that, so I won't go heavily into it other than to say the beautification committee is going to partner with them and help sponsor this event that is coming up. They also decided to spend a budget on updating the City Hall gardens here, the Whitecliff atrium space. That was, I think, about $300, yeah, $500. They were both less than $400 each. I'm sure that's all in the meeting minutes if anybody wants to get into the details on that. And we do have some upcoming events in Crestwood. On September 16th, this Saturday at 10 a.m., Tom Krauska, who is the new chairman of our beautification committee, is going to do a class on collecting seeds and taking cuttings. That will happen at his home at 10 a.m. at 9016 Robine Road, which is right across from Truman Middle School. In late September, at a date yet to be announced, there will be a monarch butterfly tagging party, which is just what it sounds like. They actually catch monarch butterflies and put tiny little tags on them to see where they go. On October 7th at 1 p.m. Will be the first Crestwood Conservation Corps program at 1 p.m. at Whitecliff. You're going to be able to learn about spring bulbs that you can plant now and even take some home with you. That is open to everyone, adults and children, and there's no cost for that. On October 21st at 8 a.m. we have a cleanup at Rayburn Park. October 28th at 11 a.m. is the Halloween Family Fun Fest at Whitecliff. Beautification Committee will be doing balloon animals and doing seed and bulb giveaways. And then there will be a planning in City Hall, but the date is TBD on that. Our next Beautification Committee meeting will be on Tuesday, October 3rd at 5:30 p.m. here in the conference room. Did I not have that? Oh, Rayburn Park cleanup, once again, is October 21st at 8 a.m. I went really fast, sorry. There's a lot. Thank you, Your Honor, that's all I have.
Okay. Alderman Sherman?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. I only have a couple quick updates. We did have a fire board meeting, and it went really well. It's my first fire board meeting I got to attend. The chief did a great job. Just a quick update, we did hire a new firefighter paramedic, as you all know, this evening. Also, the response times continue to be great. We have also letters of appreciation that were sent to the department. So everybody's doing a wonderful job. Just want to comment on that. We do have a police board meeting Monday evening. So if you all want to attend that, Monday evening here in the chamber at 7:30. Two other announcements. This Saturday is the Crestwood Night Out, so check your area, see if anyone's having a party, attend that, stop by. I will be having a party myself, so if you live in Ward 2 or anywhere else and you'd like to stop by, we're having a party from 6 to 8 that evening at my home. And the other announcement is I just wanted to comment that there is a fishing event at White Cliff Park. There's still spots available happening this Saturday morning. If you have not gone to that event, it's something really neat to get out there, especially if you just want to go by yourself or you're going to take your family. I know I took my son out there, he's 3 years old, and he likes fishing for at least 15 minutes, and he enjoyed it, so no one got hooked, we were safe, we had fun. So it's a great event, it's really neat to see the park out there. And that's all we're on.
Okay. Alderman Maybe?
For myself, just a brief report, the Public Works Board is meeting on Wednesday, September the 20th at 7 o'clock in this room. Agenda items are forthcoming. I think there's a new upgraded crosswalk on Sunray is one of the matters. The only thing I had my light on when Alderman Stager was giving her report. That's a thorough report for beautification and a lot of good things going on. I went to the Family Fun Festival last year. That was a great time. The only thing you said that I guess gave me a little bit of pause was you mentioned a sprinkler project. And I guess my question is perhaps directed to you and or the city administrator. I know beautification has a budget. You guys have done plantings and all kinds of wonderful works around the city. I don't know, I find sprinklers a lot of times to be a money pit. Water bills significantly increase when those are done. And I'm wondering, does the city need to re-examine allowing a committee to allow, or the city allow a committee to install projects that have a future impact on the budget with recurring increases in water bills and things like that?
I'm not sure that you're going to be looking at a recurring increase because they are currently using the hose here to water.
Okay.
So that water is already being used to water the plantings. The sprinkler system will simply make it so that we don't have to have personnel come up regularly and pull out the hose and water. Now, it's still valid question for our city administrator, but I just wanted to clarify that the water is already happening. We're using the water to do it. It's just going to be automated versus manual.
Is it the same schedule? We have staff watered daily, or?
It's not always staff. A lot of times it's volunteers if we can get them. In fact, we try to have it always be volunteers if we can get them, although I think Mr. Gillen has donated a lot of his time to go out and do some watering for us on occasion as well. But I'll let you speak to the rest.
We might have increased health insurance expenses because Jim's watering time out in front, of course, of the government center is sort of his zen time. To take a break in the middle of the day.
Don't begrudge him that.
Under the way our financial policies and our budgeting still works, what the beautification committee has proposed, as far as I can see, is perfectly permissible. If the board as a whole finds it to be something that they want to change or restrict, that is entirely within your purview, but I don't see any such restrictions as being in place. So if you all want to do that, tell us and we'll find a way to do it.
Well, I don't have the documents in front of me. I know when the committee was started, a lot of their tasks were plantings and monuments and things like that. They've done a fantastic job, and then it's kind of branched into improvement of neighborhood signs. I mean, the city hall grounds and the parks, I mean, I can't commend the committee's work enough, and I think everything they've done has been great. But this is the first one where I'm like, it's almost getting into a capital project, then with a recurring expense, if all of a sudden our watering goes from every third day kind of haphazardly, and we have professionally watered grounds. I mean, you could be talking thousands of dollars on the water bill. And maybe I'm overestimating that, I don't know.
I don't have knowledge to provide an estimate there.
I don't know, just a thought. It seems like maybe we need to make sure that the committee's good works can continue with the appropriate amount of regulation.
Perhaps we could ask the city administrator to look up the cost of the water for the watering system that is currently in place at City Hall, and we could see if what we're proposing is roughly the same size as White Cliff. We could probably get an idea of what those water costs would be.
Sure, and I'm not necessarily opposed to the idea of a sprinkler, but it's just the concept was a little surprising to have a committee be able to allocate $4,000 without input from us was, I don't know, maybe we need to look at that. And that's all I have.
Okay. Alderman Miguel?
Thank you, Your Honor. I have a comment and a couple of questions. I'll start with the question. Will we be receiving a list of the various neighborhood watch parties? In the past, a list has been distributed. I was just wondering if one was in the works.
We'll have one Friday afternoon.
I'm sorry?
Chief Ronley indicated that you'll have one Friday afternoon.
Okay. The 5-year plan that was presented at the last meeting, I took a closer look at the numbers there, and I kind of backed into what I think what was done. And what I noticed is that the revenues, starting with 2019, the revenues, which is 2019 through 22, projections are based on revenue increases of 0.5% and expense increases of 2%. Which explains why 2022 came in with a deficit. If that in fact turns out to be the pattern, the trend, both revenue and expenditures, we're in for some tough times down the line. So just wanted to point that out. As my colleague mentioned, there is a Public Works meeting. I believe that's on the 20th.
Did I say something different? It isn't 20. If I said something different, I apologize. But yeah, it's definitely 20.
Okay. And I guess I'm looking for some guidance there. Because, as you know, 2 aldermen will be present at that meeting, if both make it. But there's an issue that's going to come to the board, and that issue is going to require a vote on the legality or permissibility of a fence. Now, as aldermen, we will not have a vote in that yet. So my question is really, as aldermen, do we voice our opinions? Do we attempt to influence the vote? Or do we stay in the background and do we act like judges and with the jury reaching the verdict? Or do we jump in and offer our thoughts and opinions? And so I'm kind of between as far as what role that we as aldermen should play on that. And I'd appreciate any advice or suggestions that the chair or the board might care to provide me. Thank you.
Okay. Alderman Anderson? Yours.
If my
You've got the floor.
Okay. Well, we'll do it through the Planning and Zoning Commission met on September 6th. All members were present. The first matter on the agenda was a continued hearing with regarding the approval of a preliminary site plan for a proposed planned residential development at 8601 Old Sappington Road. The site in question is 1.27 acres, and the applicant was seeking to put 5 villa-type units on the site with a street and a cul-de-sac. You'll recall that this matter had come before the commission in August, and a public hearing was opened. The matter was held over for further consideration to the September meeting. Additional public comments were heard. At the heart of the matter is Crestwood's governing ordinance, which mandates at least 2.5 acres for a planned residential development unless the board, on recommendation of the Planning and Zoning Commission, waives that size requirement. After a thorough deliberation and much public input, the Commission, by a vote of 4-3, decided to deny recommending a waiver of the size requirement, which in effect means that the project, for all intents and purposes at this point, will not go forward. Also, the Commission considered several rezoning requests brought by the city for projects along or near Watson Road from M1 light industrial to C1 local businesses. The purposes of the rezoning request is to help implement and facilitate the comprehensive plan by promoting commercial businesses that will generate significant traffic and people and a recurring economic activity. The M1 designation allows for certain kinds of businesses, including self-storage units, that by nature would not attract a lot of traffic or reoccurring economic activity. And so it was hoped that by rezoning these, going forward, the city would be promoting ideas that were in keeping with the comprehensive plan. There were 3 properties involved, one at 9030 Watson, one at 9400 Watson, which is the Magna Visual building, and the 8615 Party Lane. The Commission recommended approval of the zoning change at 9030 Watson and at 9400 Watson. The request at 8615 Party Lane was tabled because a letter was received from an interested party in opposition, and it was determined that the matter should be held open for someone to appear and personally address the Commission on the request. Finally, the Commission considered a request by the city to amend the city's zoning matrix, which describes what kinds of business and economic activity can take place in various districts. The only change being considered related to public self-storage units, which can now be operated in commercial and industrial zoning districts. And by mandating, the change was being requested that the mandate move the storage units to be in an M1 light industrial or PDM, that would be a planned development, manufacturing development. Again, the goal there is to restrict these kinds of developments, which are by nature just buildings that sit there and don't bring a lot of people, don't generate a lot of economic activity, to certain areas that are more conducive to that, as opposed to our commercial corridor, which we hope to be a thriving people place and generating substantial economic activity. That was recommended, and the Commission voted to move that forward to the Board of Aldermen with a recommendation. That concludes my report regarding the Planning and Zoning Commission. There's one other matter that I would like to bring to the attention of the board tonight, and that relates to the celebration of the 230th anniversary of the drafting of the Constitution of the United States. The city has several citizens, several in Ward 4, who are members of the Daughters of the American Revolution, and they brought to my attention that the week of September 17th through the 23rd is designated by law as Constitution Week, and I'm sure we as members of the board, the public, the mayor, would all like to hold our nation's Constitution in the highest regard, urge everyone to study it, and to reflect on the privileges that we have as Americans to have such a guiding instrument. So I would just everyone to keep that in mind during the week of September 17th through the 23rd. And then one other item of interest, at least I thought, was at the fire board meeting, there was an interesting discussion with regard to burning, open burning, and the fire pits. And it's my understanding that there's going to be a recommendation for an ordinance codifying some of the requirements with regard to fire pits and open burning. And that will help some of the folks that live close to me. They've had some situations. So I was glad to see that at the fire board. Last, with regard to Alderman McGill, at the planning and zoning, I've taken the position that I should be an active member of that, ask questions. Obviously, you don't have a vote, but I think if you've got something to add or some point to make to help the discussion along, I've always felt like it's appropriate to do so. Thank you.
Okay. Alderman Kennedy?
Just one comment. Alderman Anderson and I received an email from a resident who lives on Crest Oak, who has a handicapped child, and he was just noticing there's been an increase of cars speeding along Crest Oak. That certainly is one of the streets that we've identified that might need sidewalks in the future. I would just ask, if there's a way we could coach our residents to obey the speed and be respectful of our neighbors, and like the sign says, drive like your children live here. Thank you.
City Attorney?
Lisa Stump is going to be out for a few weeks. I believe she'll be back the last week of September. So if you have any questions in the interim, please feel free to contact me.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Simpson.
2 items. First, the firefighter-paramedic that was sworn in tonight, Joseph Smart, is our new floating shift firefighter-paramedic that the board approved the hiring of earlier this year as we had a debate and discussion about our firefighter overtime budget and whether it would be more cost-effective to just increase the overtime budget, or maybe we add a floater to pick up some of those shifts. The early reports are promising. From July 13th to August 20th, there were 25 overtime shifts that were taken. In the 3 weeks since firefighter paramedic Smart has started, we've only utilized 1 overtime shift. So we've seen a significant drop-off from the addition of that firefighter paramedic floating shifter. So we're going to continue to monitor the impact, obviously, but at least in the near term, it seems like the returns are good, and that's encouraging. The other item I had, our city clerk continues to be a very diligent student and a very involved participant in her professional organizations. And she informed me this afternoon that at the Missouri Municipal League conference from which she just returned, she was selected by the Missouri City Clerks Association to be their nominee for regional director of the IIMC, which is the International Institute of Municipal Clerks. Is that what it stands for? So next May, she will be, unless there is some coup, she will be the regional director for the IIMC, representing the states of Kansas, Missouri, and Iowa, Illinois. So congratulations to her, and obviously we appreciate her involvement, and it's something that indicates that, okay, maybe we're doing a few things right here, at least our city clerk is. So very proud of her. That's all I have.
Yeah, very good, Helen. Thank you so much. My report basically involves the invitation I had last Friday to the Lindbergh Lafayette football game. where the night was basically designated to the Lindbergh Spirit of St. Louis Marching Band. Lindbergh Spirit of St. Louis Marching Band has been invited as one of only a handful of high schools to actually perform in the Rose Bowl parade this year. And Mr. Tibbett, the current president for the Rose Bowl Committee, was there to present the Rose Bowl flag to Mr. Weiss, who is the band director. And at the same time, they had a number of representatives from various communities, the state representatives from several districts who were there to honor them, and they received a proclamation from the Missouri State House of Representatives. So it was an excellent evening. It was especially great because Lindbergh won, and it was quite an enjoyable evening for everyone that was there. And I'll tell you, if you've never heard the Lindbergh Spirit of St. Louis Marching Band, they are incredible. Listening to the 3 songs they played before the president of the Rose Bowl Committee sent chills up my spine, I can tell you that. And you can tell the time and the effort that they put into becoming the band, the marching band that they are. Their endeavors are going to cost somewhere near about $600,000, and so they're looking for donations, and they are receiving quite a few. There's also an online voting that you can do to support them, and if in fact they win that voting, they will receive $5,000 towards their expenses for the travel. So. Again, it was an excellent evening, and I would encourage everyone to support them any way you can. So that is my report. Nothing else under that. Next item on the agenda is public comment. This is the public's opportunity to speak. You'll be given 5 minutes to speak on anything either on the agenda or something that is not on the agenda. And we'll start on this side. Anyone on this side care to speak? Okay, I see no hands. Anyone on this side care to speak? Yes, ma'am. Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Sue Bramer, and I live at 1086 Epperton Drive. And I'm part of the Volunteers for Christmas in Crestwood. And believe it or not, it is the season already. So I just wanted to bring you guys up to date a little bit on what's happening. We have a few changes. We're going to do our core things, the tree decorating contest, which we already have 21 businesses that turned their paperwork in, and we haven't even asked people for it yet. We are planning on 100 trees this year, and I think we'll make it. We had 96 last year. We're going to add 2 different things this year. One, we're partnering with Beautify Crestwood, and we're going to do a house decorating contest. And we'll give you more details as this moves on, but we're going to start the contest with each ward and take the winners of each ward for the latter half of December, and they will compete against each other, and we'll have the awards, and we'll have a grand prize winner at Crestwood. So hopefully they'll get a little friendly competition and help light us up a little more. We're also going to do, instead of our door hangers going on for people who like their houses, I kind of think it's obsolete. For the last 2 years, if you put lights up, you hang a door hanger on that says thanks to make it beautiful. It's kind of no fun if you get one for the 3rd time. So Mary has been working with us, Mary Statter, and getting the Boy Scouts involved. So the weekend of November 10th or 11th and 12th, I think are our dates, the Boy Scouts are going to go all over Crestwood, and we are going to hang door hangers on everybody's door, letting them know what's happening for Christmas in Crestwood. The 2 complaints we had is people don't know what's happening, which we're trying to address between door hangers. We're also going to do an insert in the Times newspaper with the scheduling, and the animals with the fireworks. And the fireworks are approved. They're going to be December 2nd in the evening. And we're working with Crestwood Animal Shelter to put out a paper or some kind of information for people on what they can do to help their pets who might be frightened with fireworks. So we're very excited. December 2nd will be our big kickoff with Santa here at City Hall. Then we're going to do a classic Santa cruise, which used to be done, I understand, in Crestwood years ago. Mayor Roby gave us the idea. And Santa will, at 2 o'clock, enter a Jeepster, really, a little Jeepster, I'm not sure.
You got it right.
Okay, did I? Filled with toys and stuff. The route this time is going to be this side of Crestwood, and we are going to publicize it, and Santa will give out candy and treats to the children. It'll be almost an hour-long cruise, and he'll end up over at the Watson Auto Plaza for the party there, the classic car show, and fireworks. And next year we'll do the other side of Crestwood. So we figured publishing a route, we can't get everywhere. If we let everybody know where they're going to be, people can go back and forth over the next 2 years. So those are our changes, and hope to see you all there and let people know it's always Christmas in Crestwood. Thank you for your support.
Thank you, Sue. We appreciate everything you and your group do. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else on this side care to speak? See no other hands? Okay, so we'll move on then to old business, of which there is none this evening. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the consent agenda. At this time, if there are any members of the board that wish to remove an item on the consent agenda, please speak so at this time. Alderman Maybe?
The reappointment of Mr. Kroger to the Public Works Board. Was there any paperwork distributed on that one, or not?
I don't believe so. I don't believe it's a reappointment that we would have necessarily sent anything out.
Okay, that's the one I pulled then.
I mean, if he was qualified to serve previously, then unless there was a problem with him, there wouldn't be any reason why he wouldn't be qualified to be reappointed.
Okay.
Did you want to pull that?
Yes.
Okay. All right, and Alderman Miguel?
I'd like to I have a couple of questions about the HVAC.
Do you wish to pull that?
Yes.
Okay. So you got the, let's see here, HVAC. Okay. Alderman Miguel. Is that the only one?
Yes.
Okay. Alderman Anderson?
The ordinance regarding the drones, invasion of privacy, and establishing regulations related.
Okay. Alderman Anderson. Okay. City Clerk, have those noted?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And I will ask for a motion and a second for a first reading.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Do I have a motion and a second for a second reading?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Okay, will the city clerk please read the titles twice, consecutively, please?
Approval of the August 22nd, 2017 regular meeting minutes. Approval of the August 15th, 2017 special meeting minutes. Approval of the toll road permits for the Knights of Columbus, Chapter 3586 and Crooked Knights of Columbus. An ordinance approving the agreement with Joseph Ward Painting Company for the competition pool painting project at Lightcliff Aquatic Center and authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute the same on behalf of the city. And ordinance amending ordinance 4603 to authorize an amendment to the agreement with State Plumbing Company for additional plumbing services and authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute the same on behalf of the city. And an ordinance to designate Crestwood Veterans Memorial Committee as a independent entity from the city of Crestwood, Missouri. I'll now read those for the second time, including Bill 1727, which moved forward from the previous meeting. Bill 1727, an ordinance approving a franchise agreement with Union Electric, DBA, and Ameren, Missouri, authorizing Ameren to maintain, operate, and use all equipment, facilities, devices, and materials in the city's rights of way to provide electricity and other public purposes, and authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute the same on behalf of the city. An ordinance approving the agreement with Joseph Ward Painting Company for the competition pool painting project at Lightcliff Aquatic Center and authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute the same on behalf of the city. An ordinance amending ordinance 4603 603, authorizing amendment to the agreement with BOA Plumbing Company for additional plumbing services and authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute the same on behalf of the city, and an ordinance to designate the Crestwood Veterans Memorial Committee as an independent entity from the city of Crestwood, Missouri.
Okay. Do we have a roll call, please?
Alderman Green?
Yes.
Alderman Wall?
Yes.
Alderman Spatter?
Yes.
Alderman Schreiber?
Yes.
Alderman Maybe?
Yes.
Alderman Miguel?
Yes.
Alderman Anderson?
Yes.
Alderman Kennedy?
Yes.
8 ayes, motion is passed.
Thank you. Okay. Takes care of the consent agenda. The next item is items removed from the consent agenda. And we'll start with Alderman Maybe with the appointment of David Kroger to the Public Works Board. Alderman Maybe, you have the floor.
Is Mr. Kroger here this evening?
No.
I have no opposition to the reappointment of Mr. Kroger. My disappointment, I would disagree with the mayor. I'm not particularly comfortable having reappointments without any kind of documentation. In this particular case, again, I have no opposition, but I'd like to see, if not a new application to serve, at least a copy of their original application to serve on the committee on a go-forward basis when we're asked to basically provide our consent to these committee appointments, which have now taken on an enhanced role in the city. And that's all I have.
Okay. Any other questions on this issue? Alderman Anderson?
Yes, I know Mr. Kroger, he's a neighbor. I know he's been involved with with that board, and I think he's been a fine member of it, and I see no reason why he shouldn't be reappointed.
Sure. All right. Alderman Breeding, you had a comment regarding this?
Yeah, Mr. Kroger has served the board very well, but my question while we're talking about it is, now, how long is his term? Just so we're all on the same page.
I believe Public Works, without looking at the list, is, I think, 2 years.
Does it coincide with the
But
mayor?
we changed that because the fact that we're doing it every 3 years. We're taking 1/3 of each board and replacing them or reappointing them every 3 years.
Okay. I was just wondering, but thank you.
Okay. We have recently increased the number of members to several boards from 5 to 7. So that ate up quite a few of the volunteer applications that we had from residents. Unless you've got some residents that you want to put on Public Works, and then we'll, but unfortunately I haven't received any names from you as of this date.
I guess again, the last time we talked about this, I thought because we're not, A, the website's not up to date on committee appointments, and B, if there are openings, I would suggest the mayor email the board and say we have openings on these committees, and when that's done, I'd be happy to provide names if there's any openings.
Okay.
But I think having people just fire volunteer forms into the dark for a committee that may be fully staffed, I don't think that's a good use of anyone's time.
Well, we get those anyway.
Well, I know we do.
You solicit them or not, we get them.
Oh, no, and that's fine, but I'm saying if you email the board and say we have an opening on Public Works or Economic Development or whatever committee it might be, then I think the board would be more than happy to seek reappointments there.
Okay. All right. Anything else, Alderman Breeding?
No, you're on the before.
All right. Okay, Alderman, maybe anything else on this issue?
No, just going forward, I'd like to see that information, but again, I have no opposition. I'd move that we approve the reappointment of Mr. Kroger.
Okay, so we have a motion. Do we have a second? We have a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Okay. Next item that was pulled was an ordinance approving an agreement with Integrated Facility Services, Inc. for HVAC improvements at White Cliff Community Center and authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute the agreement and all necessary documents in connection with said agreement on behalf of the city. And Alderman Miguel, you pulled that, so would you like to, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you. The ordinance is on page 103, and it merely indicates that it's an agreement to approve an amount not to exceed $200,000. But what caught my attention was the letter on page 121. The second second paragraph ends with, their current low bidder was Integrated Facilities with a bid of $191,200. And below the numbers there, the line reads for an amount of $59,950 more than budgeted. So that kind of caught my attention. And I didn't see any notice or any indication here that we were going to be looking at a budget amendment. So, can somebody help me understand or what's happening, or have I overlooked something?
Mr. Gillum, would you care to address that?
This will most likely be done in both fiscal years 17 and 18. So any additional numbers or monies required will be added to the fiscal year 18 budget. I do not anticipate this to be completed this fiscal year.
So the amount that's budgeted currently for this year of $150,000 then is sufficient to cover this item?
For this fiscal year.
For this fiscal year. Okay, so the $60,000 will carry over into next year.
There will be additional monies in the next fiscal year for this project as well.
Okay. Well, thank you. That helps me understand what's going on. And that's all I have, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay. Alderman Bullock, did you wish to comment on this?
Yeah, I'm still piggyback. Regards to the $150,000 budget, was that the amount that Brick had provided us an estimate for as the cost of that HVA system for the multi-purpose room?
Yes, it was. That was what they provided for us in 2015. And then after the bids came in, I sent the bids over to them, and they reviewed it, and they said that there were a couple issues that affected it. If they were to estimate that cost in 2017 dollars, it would have come up to $162,000. And they've also checked with the mechanical contractors, and their load is pretty heavy right now. So they're not bidding on everything because most of them have ample work available. And also that this is a very small project, and you're not going to get a lot of people bidding on a project of this size.
Okay.
So between all three of those factors, that yielded the higher bid. And I apologize, I didn't get the information soon enough for this packet.
No problem. Again, just for clarity, you indicated a $162,000 amount. Now, was that amount that in which the project would have been done in 2017? The project would have cost $162,000? Just look for clarity.
That would have been their estimate, but there are also the market conditions of additional work out there that drives the prices up when there's more work, and that it's a small project as well.
Okay. And again, just for clarity, when did the bid process for this project go out? Did it go out in the summer? Did it go out in the spring? And is this something that we learn now that we should, in regards to, in the event if we do have HVAC in 2018, maybe should those bids go out in the spring or March area for those providers?
The bids went out in August, and we can try and bid them out earlier in the year. It's just a matter of staff availability as far as when the projects go out for bid.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I'll yield the floor.
I have a question, Mr. Gillum. Do you know which HVAC contractor is doing our work at the Public Works facility?
Guaranteed Electric is.
They're doing the HVAC?
I'm sorry. No, I don't recall who's doing the work right offhand.
I was just curious. I didn't know whether that might be an avenue for, putting two projects together like that, since that'll be done this year and next year, as well as our community center HVAC. Okay. All right. I see no other lights, So I'll ask for a motion and a second for a first reading.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Bill number, please.
1748.
Pass that down to Alderman Miguel, please. Alderman Miguel, if you would do the honors, please.
Certainly, Your Honor. Bill number 1748, introduced by Alderman Miguel. An ordinance approving an agreement with Integrated Facility Services, Inc. for HVAC improvements at Wycliffe Community Center, and authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute the agreement and all necessary documents in connection with said agreement on behalf of the city.
Roll call, please.
Alderman Charbonneau.
Yes.
Alderman Kennedy.
Yes.
Alderman Miguel.
Yes.
Alderman Bullock.
Yes.
Alderman Statter.
Yes.
Alderman Anderson.
Yes.
Alderman Maybe.
Yes.
Alderman Reed.
Yes.
8 ayes, the motion has passed.
Okay. Alderman maybe take it from Alderman Miguel, and I have a motion and a second for second reading.
So moved.
We have a motion,
Second.
and I have a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Alderman, maybe would you do the honor, please?
Yes, Your Honor. Bill number 1748, introduced by Alderman Miguel, an ordinance approving an agreement with Integrated Facility Services Incorporated for HVAC improvements at Wycliffe Community Center, and authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute the agreement and all necessary documents in connection with said agreement on behalf of the city.
Roll call, please.
Alderman Anderson.
Yes.
Alderman Maybe.
Yes.
Alderman Charbonneau.
Yes.
Alderman Reed.
Yes.
Alderman Kennedy.
Yes.
Alderman Miguel.
Yes.
Alderman Statter.
Yes.
Alderman Waller.
Yes.
8 ayes, the motion has passed.
Thank you. The next item that was pulled from the consent agenda was the ordinance amending Chapter 16 of the Municipal Code of the City of Crestwood, Missouri, to add new sections establishing the offense of constructive invasion of privacy and establishing regulations relating to drones. Alderman Anderson, you asked for that to be pulled, so you have the floor, sir.
Yes, sir, thank you. If I would direct the board's attention to page 144 of your packet. It's under section 1, and then below that is section 16-65, constructive invasion of privacy. Dropping down from the beginning 4 lines, it starts knowingly captures through the use of, and then there's a kind of a break there, and it just seems like it doesn't complete the thought. And what I would suggest is that knowingly captures through the use of a recording device or a camera or some sort of instrumentality that would then tie into the language that follows, where it says any type of visual image, visual recording, sound recording, and so forth. The ordinance, several lines down, does use the word device, but I think it would need to tie, so I would recommend the words recording device be inserted there. And I also have a question about the language that follows after that, where it says in a manner that is offensive to a reasonable person. And I would, to me that seems vague and ambiguous and leaves us open to a challenge. I would just recommend that language be struck because you have the language in place in the following sections, in the following language where it says engaged in a private, personal, or familial activity in a place in which the person has a reasonable expectation of privacy. And so I would think that would then make a basis for determining whether there's been a violation or not. So it would be my thought that we would put in the language of recording device and then strike in a manner that is offensive to a reasonable person. The second point I would like to raise is on 145, and that relates to the definition of a small unmanned aircraft, which is at the top of the page, and it defines it, means an unmanned aircraft weighing less than 55 pounds. And I was just wondering why 55 pounds? What happens if there's one that's 56? It just seems like, unless that's some state of art, or term of art, that's used in the federal regulations or whatever, 55 pounds, it just seems kind of an odd way of defining what these craft are.
That is what the federal regulation states,
okay.
55 pounds, so.
So with that, then that would be, that's understandable. But I would ask the board's consideration of an amendment there in section 16-65.
Okay, and would you repeat that again? Going
Sure.
by the line, what line was it?
Sure. If you started with the word regardless, which is the top
right.
First word, come down 4 lines.
Okay.
It says knowingly captures through the use of, and then I would propose to insert a recording device.
Okay.
Then the phrase that follows that, I would move to strike in a manner that is offensive to a reasonable person. Okay. So that it would read, captures through the use of a recording device any type of visual image, visual recording, sound recording, or other physical impression, and then goes on from there.
Okay.
Would you mind, Alderman Anderson, it's your motion, but would you consider bifurcating those?
You want to use layman's terms?
Separating them, making those one at a time?
Sure, I don't have any problem with that. If you want to take one at a time, that would be fine.
I think we can approve both as amended once. Would you not agree?
I think we may
Well,
have
I'm
a problem
going
with
to agree
something.
with one and disagree with the other. That's why
It's
his motion. He can do what he wants. I just thought it was
understand. I guess the question I have is I'm going to ask our legal counsel. Do you have an issue with either one of these changes?
No, Your Honor, if that's the will of the board, although as I'm looking at this as the text of section 1665, I note that if you look at the second line, it starts, a person is guilty of constructive invasion of privacy if person, comma, through the use of a drone, small unmanned aircraft, etc., knowingly captures or attempts to capture or knowingly captures. And then on line 4, the language that Alderman Anderson has pointed out, it says through the use of again. I don't recall that was there, but it appears to me as though that may have just been surplusage repeating the phrase that was used earlier, so that it reads knowingly in a manner that is offensive to a reasonable person. So you still have the offense would still be a person's guilty of constructive invasion of privacy if a person, through the use of a drone, small unmanned aircraft, or similar device, knowingly attempts to capture or knowingly captures in a manner that's offensive to a reasonable person with a visual image. I'm inferring that that's what happened, and I don't know exactly why that language was put in there, but it's obviously your motion.
Well, I thought of originally of just moving to delete the language to the use of, but I thought maybe it was in there for a reason, and then just complete the thought of,
As I sit here, it looks to me like that is surplusage that should have been omitted.
And that would be fine with me. So I would make a motion then to delete the language through the use of, and I'll stop right there.
I would second that motion.
So you're just removing through the use of?
Yes.
Okay. And you're leaving in a manner that is offensive to a reasonable person?
Well, I would bring that up after we had a vote on this, if we could.
Well, it's all in the same sentence.
You made his motion, Your Honor.
Yeah, well, I understand that, but, we're talking about a sentence here that you're trying to restructure. So if you're going to restructure the sentences, let's do it in one amendment.
There's a point of order, it's been moved and seconded.
Who seconded it?
I did.
Okay. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. All right, now let's go on to the next one.
All right, I would move that the language that follows, in a manner that is offensive to a reasonable person, be struck as well. In that I think it's vague and ambiguous, and would leave the ordinance open to change.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second? I hear no second.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
We had discussion on this one, John.
Okay, we'll open it to discussion.
Could you repeat the motion? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I would move to strike the language.
Hold on. I know where it's at. I would like to hear it. I'm sorry. Just to confirm, I apologize, Jim.
I mean,
Go ahead and
what do
repeat
you want?
Could you repeat? I'm sorry. I was trying to. I've already started making previous motion notes, and I started Xing out things, and then we changed it. So I was trying to make sure that I had the correct one. That's all.
I would move, make a motion that the language, in a manner that is offensive to a reasonable person, be struck from the ordinance.
Thank you.
Okay? So we open the discussion. Alderman, maybe?
So I think I'll point out that this ordinance, this proposed section 1665, was drafted by drafted by our city attorney here in front of us, but the original language was drafted by the city attorneys collaboratively of Ellisville, Chesterfield, St. Charles, St. Peters, Clarkson Valley, and Wildwood. So a lot of thought, care, and legal time has gone into this. The term that's proposing to be struck, or the phrase that's proposing to be struck, I would be opposed to it for two reasons. First, I think the language of offensive to a reasonable person is the standard language used both in civil and criminal cases by which an invasion of privacy is judged. So I think that's a term of art. I'll let our city attorney, who's a former prosecutor, weigh in on that. And then secondly, I think when you just read it as a whole, I think the crime is doing these things in a manner that's offensive, not just the recording of someone who's engaged in a private place with a reasonable expectation of privacy, because that recording could be done in a permissible way. And so I think I don't think it's excessive or unnecessary to have that language in there, and I think it makes the ordinance more unworkable from a criminal perspective if we ever have to use this for our police and prosecutors if we remove the language. But I would welcome Mr. Malone's thoughts on this. And if he thinks the language can be struck, then I guess I can go along with it because he has more experience in the criminal realm than I do.
Well, I will say that phrase is a term of art that appears throughout a number of criminal statutes, and the concept of reasonableness is fairly widely used in determining whether conduct can be permissible, and sometimes referred to as, I guess, the reasonable person standard. So I don't believe that its inclusion would necessarily make it subject to challenge. As to the wisdom of removing it, I think that's within the discretion of the board.
You still have the floor, Alderman.
Oh, I'm sorry. I will yield the floor. I'm going to vote no if this comes to a vote. I think it should remain.
This is your ordinance, by the way.
I didn't draft this, certainly. 7 or 8 city attorneys have drafted this. I think the language is appropriate. I hope we don't have any issues with drones, but if we do, I think this section 1665 gives our police department and our city prosecutor a tool to prosecute someone who uses a drone in a wrongful fashion to invade someone's privacy. So no, I'm not in favor of striking out that language that I think would give a defense attorney some opportunity to play games with the ordinance.
All right. Alderman Miguel?
No, I have no comments, Your Honor.
Okay. So, Alderman Anderson, your second motion, got a second for the, and then we opened it to discussion. And so it was your motion to strike in a manner that is offensive to a reasonable person. and Alderman Miguel seconded that. So I will ask all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Okay. So we will leave the in a manner that is offensive to a reasonable person in the document. So the only thing at this time we are striking is through the use of. Is that correct? Yes. Okay. All right. Any other comments on this issue? I see no other lights, so I'll ask for a motion, a second for a first reading.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Bill number, please.
1749.
I said down, Alderman Statter, please. Alderman Statter, if you would do the honors when you're ready.
Bill number 1747, introduced by Alderman Statter.
49.
Excuse me.
40 what?
49.
Oh, I'm sorry.
An ordinance amending Chapter 16 of the Municipal Code of the City of Crestwood, Missouri to add new sections establishing the offense of constructive invasion of privacy and establishing regulations relating to drones.
Roll call, please.
Alderman Miguel.
Yes.
Alderman Wood.
Yes.
Alderman Kennedy.
Yes.
Alderman Charbonneau.
Yes.
Alderman Maybe.
Yes.
Alderman Reading.
Yes.
Alderman Anderson.
Yes.
Alderman Stack.
Yes.
2 ayes, the motion has passed.
Okay. Do I have a motion and a second for a second reading?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Alderman Charbonneau, would you do the honors, please?
Yes, Your Honor. Bill number 17-49, introduced by Alderman Satter, an ordinance amending Chapter 16 of the Municipal Code of the City of Crestwood, Missouri to add new sections establishing the offense of constructive invasion of privacy and establish the regulations relating to drones.
Roll call, please.
Alderman Reading.
Yes.
Alderman Maybe.
Yes.
Alderman Charbonneau.
Yes.
Alderman Kennedy.
Yes.
Alderman Wood.
Yes.
Alderman Miguel.
Yes.
Alderman Statter.
Yes.
Alderman Anderson.
Yes.
8 ayes, the motion is passed.
Okay. All right, that takes care of items removed from the consent agenda. Next item on the agenda is new business. Under new business, capital projects ranking. Mr. Simpson?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. I want to preliminarily apologize for the poor printout of the capital improvement projects ranking list that was included in the packets. If you all, I think it might be most helpful to direct your attention to the 11 by 17 printouts that's placed at your spots on the dais. What you have before you is the preliminarily scored capital improvement projects using the new rubric that the board adopted by resolution a month ago. These projects are arranged in descending order by their score as they currently stand using that capital improvement program scoring system. The last piece is to finish the score for the Board of Aldermen and Boards and Commissions ranking piece. So what I'm asking the board to do tonight is to pick their top 5 most preferred projects, and then we will cross-reference that with the top 5 projects from the Parks and Public Works Board to finalize the scoring for the capital improvement program projects. And then the projects will be finally scored, arranged in descending order, and we will build the capital improvement fund budget and any other capital projects that we can fund. We will fund projects in descending order, giving priority to the top of the list, et cetera, until we have no funds remaining from new revenues. And then any dipping into reserves, say of the capital improvement fund, which is carrying a fund balance, would be subject to the Board of Aldermen's discretion. So, summarizing that, review the list. Hopefully you've had a chance to do so prior to this. Ask any questions you might need to ask. Mr. Gillen is on hand to help answer some of those questions. it doesn't matter, and then at the end of it, we want to come up with 5 projects that the board gives the most priority to. It doesn't matter if it's 1 or 5 on the list. That makes no difference. They're all treated the same, but it's only the top 5 as the capital improvement program rubric is designed. Is that clear enough? Then I have nothing further.
Okay. Alderman Sharp.
Yes, Your Honor. I do have a question because, I mean, I don't know how passionately or some of us feel about certain projects, but I didn't know if it might be wiser for us to submit a list to you and then review at the next meeting and compile everyone's, that way if there's some we can, if no one, I'm just going to pick the first one. If no one really feels that the White Cliff Bridge is in the top 5, that can go ahead and be eliminated, so that way we're not trying to put together a slate. Or, another suggestion is maybe go down through these line by line and see if anyone's interested in making one on the top 5 first to start.
I'm open to suggestions.
Okay. I yield the floor to Alderman Wall.
Alderman Maybe was next.
I guess I had a couple of questions, but I'm also intrigued by either of those ideas by Alderman Charbonneau, because I think trying to be kind of a free-for-all, trying to formulate a top 5, so I'm open to either us bringing a list, or if we want to go line item and do like a straw poll, like who's interested in this one, that may be a useful endeavor. But I think either one of those is a good idea. I just had a couple just questions before I get into my comments. I'll come back to comments before we figure out our format, but just, so on this White Cliff Bridge, you have $0 for the 2018 cost. So I guess if the staff is just going to look into this and it's a $0 item, why do we need to weigh in on this as an expenditure of capital dollars? Or are you saying you don't want the staff to even spend time looking into it?
We're going to be making application in 2018, but those funds, if we receive the grant, it would be federal assistance and it's a multi-year process. That's not to say that we're crossing a point of no return, but you kind of sort of are, because you don't want to turn away from what is going to be a significant cost-sharing proposal from the federal government for funds funneled through East-West Gateway. So, as you can see, this is obviously the highest rated project on the list based on all of the factors that we've previously identified. It will continue to be there, and so by approving it this year, we're sort of indicating that we understand that we may be encumbering a certain amount of funds down the road, and you all need to be cognizant that this is a multiple-year deal.
And I guess just as a theoretical matter, does that 1.6 estimate, is that just a bridge, or does that also involve having to build a road, I guess, off of Valk Lane into the park during a bridge construction?
I don't know if that's included in the estimate, but I know it does include widening and reconfiguring the entrance into White Cliff, which is not serving the park well from a traffic flow perspective. It also includes our rough estimate of the cost of property acquisition and widening the sidewalk from Grants Trail to White Cliff Park and reconfiguring the sidewalk, because right now the sidewalk is on one side of the road before the bridge, then you cross the bridge, and then you have to cross over the entry lane again.
Yes.
And our project, we propose to have the sidewalk on one side of the road the entire way, just more obviously a safer configuration there. But this falls under more of the neighborhood connectivity, connecting people to places in the city that the board's identified as a priority.
And I guess my only other question before we pick our method of ranking these is, halfway down on the first page, they kind of got ranked together. You've got to replace a trail bridge at Sanders Park, a trail bridge at Lodgepole, a trail bridge at Crestwood Park, that are all park neighborhood connectivity issues. And then at the very end, you get kind of in a gray ghost out the trail connecting Morningstar Drive to White Cliff Park. It doesn't look like it has a score. Did it get a 0? Was it just
That's
not
because
scored?
it was the Grand Maybe project. We just kicked it
well, I don't live in that neighborhood, but I will say that's probably certainly I did request to have it included in the projections because I've gotten probably a dozen emails from residents in that subdivision of over 100 homes of people that they live right next to White Cliff Park, but Part D is a curvy 2-lane road with no sidewalks, and they can see the park, but they can't get to the park. So that's a resident concern. So I'm just wondering how staff viewed that.
We discussed it, and we're planning to supply gravel and mulch for the project and hope that we can identify some Eagle Scouts, of which we have many, to do this next year. So there's no need to include it in the capital improvement project list.
Okay.
I wanted to put it here to show that we didn't just out and out delete it and ignore it.
Okay, well that's great. If it's getting done without needing dollars, that's perfect.
City Administrator Simpson?
Yes.
Staff is also looking at putting in a small bridge.
That's right.
To complete that so that they don't have to go through the creek as well.
That's
so between those two thought processes and avenues, we're going to accomplish that trail.
Okay, no, that's great news. The residents in that area will be ecstatic about that. All right, I guess then I would welcome Alderman Charbonneau or City Administrator Simpson's thoughts on how to tackle this list then. I thought either of the suggestions Alderman Charbonneau made were good ones.
I'd be happy to, yeah, if everyone wanted to review the list, ask questions, send emails to myself and Mr. Gillum, and you know, we can answer any question about individual projects, but then maybe you know, everyone mutually agree to send their feedback and the top 5 ranking list. We could then, that would at least cull the field down significantly, and I could present the result of that poll with which projects have received the most votes, and then we'll come back for final approval at 9/26. That way we're maybe make some progress. That works.
So everyone submit their top 5 or rank the whole list?
I would say submit your top 5, and then I will present the projects in descending order of which ones had the most votes, and that would then identify these are the top 5 receiving the most votes from the Board of Aldermen as a whole, and then you all would ratify the list or debate on that narrower list.
It seems reasonable.
May I suggest too, if anyone does have any particular questions or want clarifications, maybe email all of us so that way we can see the responses as well. So that might. Just no response, but just if a question is asked, then a response.
Right. I would just, you know, I would recommend if the aldermen are going to be ranking these in 1 through 5, that you know, you consider seriously the conditions of some of these projects. For example, replacing HVAC, you know, versus replacing the lower White Cliff Park Pavilion, which has a ranking here of project number 2, but it's got a score of 43. But you know, I think the most important thing is to make sure that our existing systems are, if they're deficient, are replaced before we go replacing a wooden bridge or a ball field or something that of that nature. Because I think that the heating and air conditioning and roof membranes to keep the buildings from leaking are more important than at this point in time than taking on a new project. So that would be my recommendations to the board. Alderman Wallach.
Yeah, thank you. Again, I do agree that we just submit to the City Administrator our top 1 through 5, but I do have some questions in regards to some of the items. Again, I do agree with the mayor in regards to HVACs for efficiency matters, and it also helps to reduce expenses, so that may gather some weight. But the other item on the list, which is item number, I don't know which it is, it's the Government Center and Community Center for a fire alarm system. And I think it's projected to be $70,000. Could you give me a little bit information in regards to that? I don't recall seeing that previously in reports, but let me know the status of the current system.
So the current system,
right,
that doesn't exist. That's basically the answer. About a month and a half ago or so, I had, well, city staff had put together a really good safety day for city employees. It sort of stemmed from my realization that we've got kitchens all over the government center, and you know, people ought to know how to operate a fire extinguisher, and it sort of grew from there. And so we had an afternoon where there were various stations and people got first aid training and this and that and the other thing. Anyways, I thought, you know, a good way to get participation to do this is to get people up and out of their seats. When was the last time that we had a fire drill? And when Chief Arnold, I can't remember the last time we had a fire drill, you know it's been a while, so okay, let's do that. Well, immediately after that staff meeting, Chief Oliveri approached me and said, you know, Chris, we don't have a fire alarm in the government center. So I guess the current system right now is if there is a fire, say over in the police department side of the building, we're going to count on, you know, one of our spry young firefighters to come run over to this side of the building and tell everyone to get out, which is certainly less than optimal. So that, I added that to the list.
No, I agree. I think safety matters should also rate higher. And in regards to number 2, again, I think you alluded to the engineering design amount. Let me talk about some of the concerns I've got. Again, you talk about a capital improvement program, but you also have a parks tax, sales tax, also capital sales tax that we use for these capital improvement projects. So I'm trying to find interlocking, because we've mixed in both features here into this combined list, which is what I see as some's really related to parks, or our parks related sales tax funds, and some is really related to the infrastructure, which is really designated towards the capital sales tax that we capture, which is that half cent. So I'm just trying to, maybe it might be easier for us if we could. And again, I can't remember when we approved this capital improvement program, but I really pictured to see parks-related projects in it. And when I mean parks-related projects, it's really the bridge as it relates to the Sanders Park and some of these other items, really parks items. So just educate me, are we better off kind of eliminating, just focusing on infrastructure-related items and structures as it relates to that, or we're kind of doing both here, and I'm just trying to find the interplay and why we don't rank maybe the top 5 for infrastructure, then the top 5 for the parks, and then scale it down.
My recommendation is that the board's practice when I started here was to fund only parks capital improvement projects out of the Parks and Stormwater Fund, and to fund almost every other capital project out of the Capital Improvement Fund. And there's no policy that the board has adopted that mandates that be the case. And in looking at the revenues that are generated by the Parks and Stormwater Fund, considering that we have now significant operating expenditures out of there for staffing our Parks and Recreation department, operating the aquatics facility, that leaves very little left for capital projects. As you can see, we have most of these projects are park-related capital projects. And the Parks Fund just does not have the resources to sustain that level of capital project load. So I think it makes sense for park projects and infrastructure projects and facility projects to all compete with one another for capital improvement dollars, whether they come from the Parks and Stormwater Fund or the Capital Improvement Fund or the General Fund if that ever is appropriate. We're going to determine the best way to fund them once we know what the priorities are, and then okay, maybe, yeah, we've got some money left between our operating costs in the Parks and Stormwater Fund and what we expected to generate in revenue. Say there's $200,000 there, just hypothetically. Then we'll find $200,000 of parks projects to fund out of that fund, and go down the list in terms of priority. And then we'll go through the Capital Improvements Fund list and do the same thing with those available revenues.
Well, the only thing I question and begin, I'm assuming at the next Parks meeting we may talk about this, but primarily the Parks Board really talk about parks-related projects. And I guess my question then to you is when we have the Parks meeting coming up, which is next week, I'm assuming we may have the same list, but is it really right for the committee, for the Parks Committee, to really talk about government center projects on this capital improvement listing, or just focus in on parks improvement projects?
I would expect that they would focus on parks projects, and the Public Works Board would focus on the other projects.
Okay. And I just got, again, thank you for the clarity on that. I just wanted to, I've got my rankings 1 through 5. I've also had 6, A, and D now. Again, 5 went in there because of the alarm system. But again, I feel that's a safety item that we need to have. But number 6A that I had, again, I'm just going to toot the horn in regards to the replacement of the trail bridge at Sanders Park. That's a bridge that's over the park. Again, that's just kind of a segue to that park as it relates to Ferndale. I don't know if anyone's seen that. It's really, and it needs repair. Again, my wife and I would walk there with our dogs. Again, we don't walk there anymore with the dogs because the treads, there's like a 1-inch gap, or maybe less than that. And I don't want the dogs to stumble and hurt their legs, as well as the appearance-wise. Again, appearance-wise goes a long way when we talk about when we had the barbecue at Crestwood Park. It kind of leads to the community. If we have a restroom facility looking the way it is, not up to date, we should have the same appearance as it relates to our parks, whether it's the bridge, whether it's the restroom. So again, those are some of the things that I do rank high, but unfortunately it's not in the top 5. But I just want to make some comments about that. Are you looking forward?
I believe the junior alderman from Ward 3 is next, Alderman Miguel.
Thank you, Your Honor. First, I don't see a cost associated with the second item there, the sidewalks.
We're still developing our estimate, but if you recall from the Joint Public Works Board of Aldermen meeting, I think we were, around 100, go ahead, Jim, you probably have the latest.
Well, we don't have the update on the tree removal, but I still believe we're in about the $400,000 range when you consider you're replacing sidewalks and you're removing trees. And you're doing it citywide. So it is significant.
So the number that I can pencil in for now would be 400,000?
That would be my recommendation.
Okay. And we did say something like a 3-year plan, but this number is still 400,000.
I think we just talked about a 1-year plan.
A 1-year plan.
I think we wanted to address, I think we wanted to change the policy.
Yeah.
And we'll discuss that next week again with the Public Works Board. And then we're trying to get everything done all at one time so we can somewhat have a clean slate and a starting point moving forward so that we can have an annual cost that is somewhat level as we move forward. And that would be for the maintenance and repair of sidewalks.
A somewhat level cost, you know, you're talking about multi-years.
Forever.
Forever.
We will, if we're going, no, not 400,000, whatever that smaller number will be, maybe it's $50,000 a year, but we'll have to have some cost on an annual basis to maintain sidewalks, just like we have an annual cost to maintain streets.
Okay, well, I'm confused. I thought you said $400,000 one time.
Just to catch up.
Just to catch up. And then from that point forward, 50,000 or another number.
Whatever that number is, we'll have to have that on an annual basis for any repairs and replacements that should come up.
But for the purposes of this chart, we're looking at 400,000.
Yes.
Okay. I don't feel like I'm really qualified or to vote on this stuff. There's a lot in here that I really don't understand. As an example, the third item down, replace switchgear and breakers. I really don't know what that means. So it's, yeah, I mean, I really don't know enough that I can intelligently vote on many of the, at least some of these items in here. Also a question of urgency. How urgent is this bridge replacement? Is that bridge going to is it deteriorating to the point where it's going to need some structural repair, if not replacement, within the next X number of years? So, you know, I guess I feel I need a sense of how urgent are these issues, whether, and as an example, on the other extreme, the Lake Cliff Amphitheater, hey, as far as I'm concerned, there is no urgency. The urgency on that one is nil. So, but certainly it's not going to be nil. At some point, the bridge is going to be 100%. So I feel I'm lacking a sense of urgency here at the same as far as the HVAC is concerned. And along with urgency then are the consequences. If we don't do the bridge, we need to make some structural repairs or something like that. So I just don't feel that, I mean, I could, if I were to vote on these, I'd probably just vote based on the numbers. I'd probably just take the first 5, because I really don't have much knowledge to go beyond that, and I see that it kind of drops pretty quickly, and I would think that, you know, just based on the numbers here, after you get through the 40s, down to the 40s, which is really, I guess, of the first 10 projects, there's probably not much here that can't, beyond that can't be postponed. I also agree with Alderman Wallach. You know, it has been past practice as far as a parks budget and a capital improvement budget, and between the two, the capital improvement budget has been the most stressed. And if there's any attempt here to do all this, or a lot of this that is park related, to do it out of the capital improvement budget, there's going to be nothing in the, there really isn't enough in the capital improvement budget to even, to take care of what needs to be done, from that project. Let me try and rephrase that or clarify what I said. There isn't enough money in the capital improvement project to fund more than what is designated, what would specifically apply to that budget based on the project, this project list. On the White Cliff Bridge, you say a multi-year project of $1.6 million. But if we're looking at a government grant, I'm not sure how much that would get spread out. So I guess I'm curious or wondering how this would be financed, other than that, without going into debt.
Jim, I believe the match on that was 80%?
That's correct, just like the
The grant is
project.
80%, so the city share would be 20%.
20% of the 1.6?
That's correct, it'd be approximately $320,000.
Okay.
And it's a multi-year project because in the first year you've got to make an application and apply for the grant. In the second year you'll have to do the design. In the third year you'll have to do easement acquisition and property acquisition. And then in the fourth year you'll have to do construction.
Okay, but if it's an 80% government grant, 320,000, whatever the number is doable, at least in my opinion. so that kind of helps me understand that one a little bit better. The last item on that first page, $4 million, how would that be adjusted from a funding perspective?
If we got to that point, that would be an option we have to discuss with the board. But that's from the original White Cliff master plan. And because this plan has not been updated since it's been adopted, staff didn't feel that we had the authority to remove any projects from that list. Obviously, that's something that the board could decide to do.
And I would go back to the questions I suggested earlier. What is the urgency and what are the consequences?
So in the CIP score, the leftmost column, one of the most powerful factors affecting that score is the need of the project. One of the things that we asked ourselves as we were scoring this is, are there any immediate or foreseeable negative consequences for not proceeding with this project? You know, the fire alarm system, for instance, carries some obvious negative consequences. The failure of a bridge into our centerpiece park, which we know has a life needs to be replaced in about 5 years. There's a sense of urgency there. The citywide sidewalk improvements, given the priority placed upon connectivity and walkability in the comprehensive plan based upon the risk of the city taking on responsibilities for the sidewalks but not taking care of displacements and trip hazards, is another factor impacting the score. Again, you might go back and review the CIP scoring rubric that we discussed in August to familiarize yourself with the various factors once again, but the strongest driving factor is need. I believe 25% of the overall score roughly is that need category. I think that's followed by Board of Aldermen and Board of Commission prioritization.
So that need on HVAC, I would ask for Mr. Gillum to comment on the need to replace that HVAC.
We're in the process.
45s, excuse me.
Huh?
We're at 45s, items that score 45. What's the need there?
Well, right now we are replacing some HVAC units over at the community center, and we're going to be replacing 4 units with 1 unit. And right now, 2 of those 4 units have failed and are no longer functioning. Last year, we were bidding out the HVAC unit at the Sappington House Museum, went in, failed. So the last 2 years, we've planned to replace, and I guess this year we're going to do the multi-purpose room. So the last 2 years, we've had 6 different units that we wanted to replace, and 3 of them have failed before we had the opportunity to replace them. So over at White Cliff Park, we've got the community center, we've got 9 units, and we've got 4 of them getting replaced right now. We've got 1 of them in the multi-purpose room to get replaced. We've got 4 more units to get replaced. I'm thinking it's a pretty good chance that the next 2 years that 1 or 2 of those is going to go out, because that's what's happened right now.
With the lead time necessary on those HVAC projects, we can't just get that turned around in a month. You got to go out to bid because it's a 6-figure project, which takes time. Then they got to build it, which takes, what, another month or 2, and then installation.
I'll bump that up a little bit more. Sorry.
So we're talking 4, 5, 6 months just to get something replaced. We can't afford to have them fail, and I believe the units that we're replacing date back to the late 70s.
That is correct.
So.
Yeah,
we got some needs.
I think that, again, but we have items on here that are rated 45s, and it's replacing switchgear breakers, roof sections 6 through 10, HVAC at both White Cliff Community Center for a number of different areas. My concern is if we drop down and start saying, oh, let's replace the lighting at the White Cliff Community Center, and then all of a sudden one of these HVAC units goes out. Now we got to come up with more money than what we originally had anticipated. I believe we need to take care of those issues that obviously have the higher rating and work our way down the list. So the bridge we've talked about, you know, is one of those things that's going to take years, and it's going to be a grant involved in that. And the city sidewalks, in my opinion, been the way they are since the city was formed, and so there's no real rush on those. But you know, replacing switch gears and breakers, you know, they go out, and if they go out, you're going to have to pay the money to replace them. So, you know, my feeling is anything below that first 5 or 6 items, really not even worth talking about until we get those items up top taken care of.
Mayor, if I may too.
Go ahead.
To speak to the switchgear and breakers, just to add something else to that. One of the things we did earlier this year, you might recall, was have a multi-department emergency operations exercise and review that was conducted by Chief Arnold. Pretty much the only room it makes sense to set up as our emergency operations center is this one. And in doing that, we kind of sat down and we figured out, okay, how did that go? What did we learn from this experience? And one of the things we learned, one of the benefits of making it multidisciplinary was we had the benefit of having John Bonarks, our facilities leader, in the room. And he mentioned, if you guys are going to be operating out of this room in emergency, you should know this room is one of the few in the building that's not tied to the backup generator. Oh, okay. So we included that in that project, number 6 there. So that helps justify some of the need as well. Because
that's what the switchgear is about?
It's partially related to that. But there's, you know, I can't speak to the electrical engineering side of things.
Well, we've got the switchgear that is obsolete. The manufacturer is no longer in business. The equipment is known for failing. Our insurance company has required that every other year for probably the last 6 or 8 years we get an infrared scan because the equipment is notorious for having issues. Fortunately, those scans have been favorable, but we're to a point where we need to get it replaced, and we need to get additional items on the backup generator, like the chambers, like the city administrator's office, the finance officer, the fire chief's office. There are key people in this organization that are not on the backup generator, and we have to make sure that they are.
So you're talking about power switching when we lose current? This is...
We have an automatic transfer switch.
This is what we're talking. Is this what we're talking about? Is from losing power here to a generator, backup generator kicking in? Is that?
That's a piece of the project.
25%. Help me understand this third item.
Probably 20% is making sure that we have offices of key personnel in the city administration on the backup generator, so that in a natural disaster, they're still able to operate and we're still able to meet.
We're able to operate as a city. You mean police and fire?
Yes.
So
the fire chief, the city administrator, and the finance officer, their offices are not on backup generator power. So if we lose power here, then we're going to have to immediately set them up somewhere else.
So
the chambers here is not on backup power. So we don't have a meeting location where we can get together as staff and operate.
So what you're telling me is that this is necessary to handle emergencies?
That is part of it. That may be approximately 20% of it. But the big thing is 20%. The big thing is the equipment that we have is obsolete and is known for failing, and it needs to be replaced.
Do I need to spend the entire $200,000 here to get that 20%? Or can I just spend 20% of that $200,000 here?
We need to spend the entire amount, because it's a twofold project here. We want to get rid of the obsolete equipment that has a poor failure rate, and then we need to get the appropriate key staff and the key rooms at City Hall hooked to the backup generator, so that when there's a natural disaster, we're still able to operate as a city and still respond to the needs of the residents.
Okay. So this is emergency backup equipment.
A small part of it will be
and operating equipment.
Jim, explain to them, if you would, what happened when we had that big power outage. What was it, a year ago or a year and a half ago or whatever it was, when we had departments didn't have full electricity. We couldn't operate radios. We couldn't operate equipment, and so we had to address that right away. And this is all equipment that's operating off of these switch gears and breakers. So it's got to be replaced because it's obsolete.
Okay. Well, that helps me understand that item, because I really had no idea what it was. I'm sorry.
Don't open your electrical box downstairs. Stay away from it. Yeah.
And I can provide some more detail to get redistributed to the aldermen, and we will be reviewing it at the Park Board meeting and the Public Works Board meeting next week as well.
Okay, very good. Okay. That helps me, my understanding a lot. Thank you. That's really all I have, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Alderman, maybe?
I guess just a couple thoughts. I know we're going to be emailing in our top 5 here, but I appreciate the city administrator's comments about combining these projects and not being so hyper-focused on what fund things are coming out of. And I'll agree to a point, but as I look down this list, I have no doubt that we will easily overwhelm the capital budget with just our normal street repairs, sidewalks, and the, all of these overdue maintenance items. And while some of them, for instance, say the HVAC is in need of critical replacement, depending on how the numbers work out, I'm fine potentially spending, say, HVAC capital dollars out of the capital improvement fund for White Cliff. But as I look back over the budget, it looks like we generally kind of split the capital dollars. The capital improvement budget's around $1 million, but we have 400,000, 450, maybe 500 set aside for building improvements, and then for parks we had about 300 or 400 for capital projects. And so if there's certain of these projects we can't fund out of the parks budget, so I guess I'm sure based on need, I imagine quite a few of us are going to put more government center overdue maintenance items toward the top, but then I guess is staff left kind of directionless on the park projects that that we may have unallocated, we may have room in the parks budget, however stretched that budget may be, to to cover a parks project that may in the grand scheme of things is not as critical as another project, but it can be funded out of that fund, whereas some others cannot.
I'm not quite sure I entirely followed you, but let me attempt to answer. We're going to start.
Can I rephrase briefly? So let's say we've got 450,000 set aside for capital improvements in the parks budget. And I'm just going off historically, that's what we've done the last couple of years, give or take. And let's say HVAC projects at White Cliff, you've got 185 and 140, and that's going to use up a good portion of that. As I'm looking at the kind of critical list, you know, you're building improvements for $400,000 that are in the capital fund. You know, the switch gear, the roof, and the fire alarm really almost eat that up. So then, you know, say window replacements is the next most critical thing, but you can't fund that because you don't have any other capital dollars. You know, does staff want input then on, hey, we have 50 grand left that we could spend on a parks capital project, and even though we don't necessarily think that a parks project should be higher than a government center project, it may just be there's dollars there that could be spent, and there's, certainly as I look at this list, there's unmet needs all over the city.
So, I guess the answer is yes. We're going to attempt to fit in as many high priority projects as we possibly can. And then if we get to a certain point where there's just $10,000 left, and you know what, the only $10,000 project might happen to be somewhere, you know, where there's a $20,000 project that's way down the list, not high priority at all, but we've actually got, you know, revenues to do that, that might get funded because everything else is just too big to be sustained by the other funds. That's how I'm going to prepare the budget. You all at the end of the day can make the decision, but at least I have a system by which I can say how we prepared it. You know, part of the problem is you're looking at historically what we spent in the Parks and Stormwater Fund and capital projects, but that level of spending on capital projects is unsustainable for that fund. We're to the point where if you look at the available fund balance we're carrying in Parks and Stormwater, we're down well below where I think we ought to be because it is an operating fund, even though you might not consider it alongside the general fund. But we've got recurring operating expenditures coming out of there. And so I'm extremely uncomfortable spending down that fund balance anymore, which means we're only going to spend what we anticipate taking in on revenues. And most of what we take in on revenues is going to be committed to operating. So there are funds available for capital projects out of Parks and Stormwater, but they're a lot less than what I think recent history has shown.
Okay.
That goes back to why I suggest we be open to funding park projects out of the capital fund. It's legally permissible. I don't think it's out of character for anything. Plenty of other communities do it in the region, and that allows us to prioritize the dollars, the precious dollars that we do have, and prioritization comes back to this list.
And I'm open to that if the parks projects in a certain year wind up more critical than a general capital project, say at the government center. I'm completely fine funding a parks project out of the general fund, but I mean, I think it was Alderman Miguel mentioned, I'm not sure who, if it wasn't him, I may be mistaken, but I mean, that budget is certainly stressed as well. I mean, there's not a lot of extra capital dollars. That fund's down $1 million over the last 15 years. You know, obviously there may be a little bit of rope in the general fund for certain projects, but not a ton. I guess, and dollars are dollars, but my preference would be, rather than paying Parks and Rec staff, which is an operational fee out of Parks and Stormwater, a lot of cities pay them out of the general fund. Perhaps that should be considered, and then free up Parks dollars for capital. But that's getting a little off topic.
And based on my back of the napkin calculation, that would throw the general fund into a deficit.
That's nice. Yeah, I mean, obviously we're aiming for balanced budgets, but we're always walking a tightrope, it seems like. Okay, and I guess, you know, I'm not going to claim I'm an electrical engineer or anything like that, but I think a lot of these projects are self-explanatory, but, you know, we have this overall ranking and that's helpful, but I guess in the next couple of weeks before we submit our rankings, any additional info on any of these staff could provide. I mean, a lot of background's been shared tonight. Hey, we tried to have a staff meeting, there's no fire alarm, there's no backup generator, our switch gears are ready to explode in the insurance company. I mean, all of that's helpful to give us that background so we can intelligently rank these. I mean, I'm sure a lot of us would love to go to residents and say, hey, we have this cool new improvement in Sanders Park or White Cliff Park, but when critical government infrastructure is crumbling around us, those are probably our priorities. I don't discount the sidewalks. I don't think it's just a neighborhood connectivity thing. It's a massive tort liability for the city. I mean, cities have a legal responsibility to maintain safe sidewalks. and we're probably right on the threshold of not doing that appropriately, so I concur that that one needs to be right up there. And that's something the city hasn't done for 10, 12 years, and that's unfortunate. Earlier tonight, Mr. Gillen mentioned that maybe the budget that came in on our HVAC project was a little bit high because it was a project of a certain size. And then I guess, I'm not an expert on this, but if any of these projects should be grouped together to maximize efficiencies in budgeting. And I'll throw, for example, we have project number 20, like 2/3 of the way down, is replacing the electrical switchboards, panels, and transformers at White Cliff. Is that something where if that's packaged with the switchgear and breakers at the government center, do you attract bigger contractors on a $500,000 project and get a better bid and save the city money in the long run?
You will get a better bid, but I don't know that you're going to get $100,000 better bid. It might be $20,000 or $30,000. And I guess the question is, do we have $400,000 available to do that project in 1 year? That's kind of the balancing act and the give and take. That's still why we have the other two HVAC units over at White Cliff separated out, because do we want to spend $150,000 on each project, or do we want to spend $280,000 to do them at the same time? It's a matter of what funding is available and what else is competing for those funds.
I mean, I guess, for purposes of this and for the next year, we can, I'd appreciate more information from staff. We can give our top 5, but I definitely, I think more so than most years, I would want to see a really detailed 5-year plan from staff on capital projects, both in the capital and the parks fund, and will we have the dollars to cover what we need to cover. I think it's going to, just looking at this ballpark, I think it's going to be really tight. You'd hate to think that it'd have to be a bond issue, but at some point, if you have crumbling infrastructure, and just because it's been delayed so long, I think you have to give that a long, hard look if there's not operational dollars to cover these things. And I hope we're not to that point, but I guess I want to see a good 5-year plan from staff and see if we can meet our obligations.
Mr. Gillen, what do we pay for, just as a ballpark, what do we pay for a, what you call it, infrared test of our switchgear every year for the insurance company?
I don't have a number for that right away.
I mean, is it $50? Is it $1,000? Is it $5,000? What is it? I mean, give me a ballpark.
I would say it's less than $5,000.
Okay. So, but if we replaced it, now we're going to be saving that $5,000 we're spending every year, and it seems to me like that would be a priority.
It
Otherwise,
certainly
we're
is.
just throwing good money down a dark hole.
In this specific situation, it is a good thing to go ahead and get it taken care of.
Okay. So that's one where we could actually save money in the long run by replacing those and getting them replaced as soon as possible.
And probably save on our insurance as well.
Okay. All right. So there's some residual advantages there. Okay. And the other thing I was going to say is, with regards to these projects, if we pick a number of projects, and let's say we expend I'm just going to throw a number out, $500,000 that we allocate for projects, and we expend that money except $10,000 or $20,000. I would recommend that we just hold on to that and not spend that $20,000 on a project, and let's see how the projects that we are funding come in, because if, like our backhoe loader or whatever it was that we bought, where we thought it was going to be a certain amount, and we actually saved $20,000 or $30,000 on that deal. Now we've got 20 or 30 we could add to that 10 or 20 and maybe do a bigger project. So I wouldn't be in such a big hurry to spend the entire amount of the budgeted capital for these projects if we've got a little left over. So, I'm sorry, Alderman, maybe you still have the floor.
No, I'm sorry, I have nothing else. I mean, it's troubling numbers, a lot of hard decisions ahead of us, so as much info as staff can give us so we can make these rankings would be appreciated.
Okay. Yeah.
And to your point, Alderman, part of this is certainly a transition as we get more comfortable with this program, but the ideal outcome that we develop, it's just been a matter of not having time to put it all together, but I'm hoping to incorporate it at the end of this year's budget document is every single project has its own unique page, theoretically with a description, a cost, a schedule of the project, a photograph, everything to kind of justify the existence of that project, so that on a go-forward basis, then, you know, it's a major task to get all of these projects that created, but once we do, then we're just adding just a few every year and able to maintain it. So you'll have that information, and the public will have that information at their hands going forward.
Okay, great.
Okay. All right. Alderman Miguel, did you have a comment? Can you make it short?
Thank you. Yeah, I support Alderman maybe completely as far as separation between the capital improvement fund and the park and stormwater fund. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Alderman Waller also pointed in that direction. In looking at these projects, the bridge is a zero-cost item, yet we're for 2018, as I understand the numbers, right?
That's correct.
But we still want to vote on that, or is that kind of like, hey, you know, maybe amongst ourselves right here and now we can say, yeah, we want to go forward with that, or should that be a separate topic, that grant application? Could be considered next week, at the next meeting perhaps? Or do we need to spend what our 5 votes on that?
I mean, you can all do what you want, but I think, you know, the system is designed this way. I encourage you to stick to the 5, and that includes this project.
Okay. Just a comment, because it's been touched on here as far as fund balances are concerned. As I was looking at some reports earlier this afternoon, and I know that fund balance is not the same as cash balance, but it should be fairly close. And I saw, it looked to me like there were differences, year-end differences of something in the area of $300,000, give or take, between the fund balance and the cash balance. So perhaps someone can look at that, or perhaps someone could explain the discrepancy to me. I know you're not prepared, but again, it's just something that I observed earlier today, and I expected those 2 numbers to be fairly close. And the differences that I saw in the magnitude of the fund balance was roughly $300,000 higher than the year-end cash balance. So I just made that observation. And that's really all I have, Your Honor. Thank you.
If you'd send that question, just so I know exactly what you're talking about, to me by email, we can have Rick and I look at it, get back to you.
Okay. All right. See no other lights. Next item on the agenda is introduction of bills or future issues. Alderman, maybe?
Yes, Your Honor, just one item. I don't know if we need a formal presentation, but perhaps that would be useful just so we can see what's being done. But what I wrote down here was if we could have either a written report or an in-person report at the second meeting in October from the Sappington House Foundation, where they could, we could receive their code-mandated annual report. Our code has them have to give a report by November 1 that has their activities for the year, their operations, their expenditures, their revenues, so on and so forth. And I haven't seen the reports from the last couple of years, so if we could get the 2015 and 2016 reports ahead of time for comparison's sake, and then I'm fine receiving a written report at that meeting, or if they want to do it in person so we can ask questions and talk about their activities and plans for the upcoming year, that might be a good opportunity for that, depending on what else is on the agenda.
Okay. Okay. You see no other lights? All right. So I will ask the city clerk to read the closed session notice, please.
The Board of Aldermen is scheduled to meet this evening in closed session immediately following this meeting in order to discuss matters in accordance with Missouri Revised State Statute 610.0211. In order to adjourn to closed session, there needs to be a motion, a second, and a roll call vote.
We have a motion and a second.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Take roll call, please.
That was made by Alderman Davey.
Maybe, and it was seconded by Alderman Anderson.
Alderman Reedy?
Yes.
Alderman Mullen?
Yes.
Alderman Statter?
Yes.
Alderman Charbonneau?
Yes.
Alderman Navy?
Yes.
Alderman Anderson? Yes. Alderman